Maya Johnson lies motionless on the cold supermarket floor, her 3-year-old daughter Zoe screaming beside her unconscious mother. The metallic taste of blood fills Maya's mouth as she slowly regains consciousness from the taser shock. Around her, shocked customers whisper and point their phones, recording everything. Officer Derek Collins stands over her, his hand still gripping the smoking taser. His face twisted with satisfaction. Maya tries to speak, but can only whisper one word that will change everything. Marcus. Her husband's name carries a weight. Officer Collins doesn't yet understand. This moment will destroy careers and expose a conspiracy reaching the highest levels of the police department. Maya Johnson pushed her shopping cart through the automatic doors of Coastal Plaza Market. Her 3-year-old daughter Zoe perched in the front seat, chattering excitedly about the colorful cereal boxes they passed. At 29, Maya carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned respect through hard work and dedication. Her navy blue scrubs bore the embroidered logo of Virginia Beach Naval Hospital, where she worked as a pediatric nurse, caring for the children of military families stationed at the world's largest naval base. Her wedding ring caught the fluorescent lights as she reached for organic apples, the simple gold band engraved with the date she married Marcus Johnson 5 years ago. Zoe pointed at the bright red apples and Maya smiled, placing several in a plastic bag while explaining to her daughter about healthy eating choices. Maya had volunteered at the local community center every Saturday for the past 3 years, mentoring young girls from disadvantaged backgrounds, teaching them about college opportunities and career paths in healthcare. Her own journey from a working-class neighborhood in Norfolk to becoming a registered nurse had been filled with challenges, but she never let obstacles define her potential. She spoke softly to Zoe as they moved through the produce section, selecting fresh vegetables for the dinner she planned to cook for Marcus when he returned from his training exercise. Maya always shopped at this particular store because it was close to their home in a quiet neighborhood where military families felt safe raising their children. The store manager, Jennifer Walsh, often greeted Maya by name, appreciating her patience with elderly customers who moved slowly through the aisles and her gentle way with children who became fussy during long shopping trips. Maya checked items off her carefully written grocery list, mindful of their budget despite Marcus' steady income as a Navy SEAL team leader. She never bought anything impulsively, always planning meals ahead of time and looking for sales on healthy foods that would nourish her family. Maya paused at the organic baby food section, selecting several jars for their neighbor's infant, knowing the young mother was struggling financially while her husband deployed overseas. This act of kindness was typical of Maya's character, always thinking of others even during her own busy errands. Zoe clapped her hands when Maya showed her the colorful labels on the baby food jars, and Maya explained how they would give these to baby Emma next door. Maya pushed her cart toward the dairy section, unaware that she had been under surveillance from the moment she entered the store. Officer Derek Collins had been sitting in his patrol car in the parking lot, ostensibly monitoring traffic but actually watching customers enter and exit the upscale grocery store. At 42, Collins carried 15 years of police experience and a growing list of civilian complaints that had been mysteriously dismissed by his supervisors. His pale blue eyes tracked Maya's movement through the large windows of the store, his jaw tightening as he watched her select expensive organic products and name-brand items. Collins had been reprimanded twice in the past year for excessive use of force, but both incidents had been quietly resolved through union intervention and departmental politics that favored protecting officers over civilian rights. He radioed dispatch with a fabricated report about a possible shoplifting incident at Coastal Plaza Market, knowing his supervisor would approve his decision to investigate. Collins entered the store through the main entrance, his heavy footsteps echoing on the polished floor as he scanned the aisles for Maya's location. His hand rested casually on his service weapon as he approached the customer service desk, where he informed the teenage clerk that he needed to review security footage for an ongoing investigation. Jennifer Walsh emerged from her office when she heard an officer was requesting access to store security systems, her brow furrowed with concern since no incidents had been reported. Collins claimed he received a radio call about someone matching Maya's description who had allegedly stolen electronics from a store 3 blocks away 20 minutes earlier. Maya continued shopping peacefully, selecting low-sodium chicken broth and whole-grain pasta, while Zoe sang a nursery rhyme she had learned in preschool. Maya's shopping cart contained nothing but healthy foods, baby items for her neighbor, and household necessities like laundry detergent and dish soap. She moved efficiently through the store, checking her list and calculating the total cost in her head to ensure she stayed within their weekly grocery budget. Maya reached for a container of Greek yogurt when she noticed a uniformed police officer watching her from the end of the aisle, his intense stare making her uncomfortable. Collins pretended to examine breakfast cereals while keeping Maya in his peripheral vision, waiting for the right moment to approach her with his fabricated accusations. Maya tried to ignore the officer's presence, focusing on finding the specific brand of whole-grain bread that Zoe preferred for her morning toast. She pushed her cart toward the checkout lanes, ready to complete her shopping trip and return home to prepare lunch before her evening shift at the hospital. Collins stepped directly into Maya's path as she approached the front of the store, his badge clearly visible on his chest and his expression stern with manufactured authority. Maya stopped her cart and smiled politely, assuming the officer needed assistance or was conducting some routine security check that she would quickly resolve. Collins demanded to see her identification and receipts for the items in her cart, claiming he had reasonable suspicion that she was involved in criminal activity. Maya calmly explained that she had not yet paid for her groceries and was heading to the checkout counter when he stopped her. Collins insisted that she matched the description of someone who had committed a crime at another location. Despite Maya's obvious confusion about his accusations, Maya reached for her purse to retrieve her driver's license and military-dependent ID card, moving slowly and deliberately to avoid any misunderstanding about her intentions. Collins became more aggressive in his tone, demanding that Maya step away from her shopping cart and place her hands where he could see them. Maya complied with his requests while asking specific questions about what crime she was suspected of committing and why he believed she was involved. Zoe began to sense the tension in the air and started crying softly, reaching for her mother with outstretched arms. Maya spoke soothingly to her daughter while maintaining eye contact with Collins, trying to de-escalate a situation that seemed to be spiraling beyond reason. Collins grabbed Maya's arm roughly when she moved to comfort Zoe, claiming that her movement toward the child represented a threat to officer safety. Jennifer Walsh approached the confrontation after observing Collins' aggressive behavior from the customer service desk, knowing Maya as a regular customer who had never caused any problems in her store. Collins ordered Walsh to stay back and not interfere with police business, threatening to arrest her for obstruction of justice if she continued to advocate for Maya's innocence. Maya carefully removed her wallet from her purse and presented her driver's license and military-dependent identification card to Collins, speaking in the calm, professional tone she used when dealing with difficult situations at the hospital. Collins barely glanced at the identification documents before dismissing them as potentially fraudulent, claiming that criminals often carried fake credentials to avoid arrest during police investigations. Maya maintained her composure despite the increasingly hostile atmosphere, explaining that she worked as a pediatric nurse at Virginia Beach Naval Hospital and could provide additional verification of her identity if necessary. Collins refused to contact the hospital to confirm Maya's employment, instead demanding that she accompany him outside for further questioning, away from the growing crowd of concerned customers. Jennifer Walsh stepped forward with a tablet displaying the store's security footage, clearly showing Maya shopping peacefully for the past 25 minutes without engaging in any suspicious behavior. Collins pushed the tablet away without viewing the evidence, claiming that video footage could be easily manipulated and did not constitute reliable proof of innocence. Maya asked Collins to explain the specific crime she was suspected of committing, noting that she had not left the store or attempted to conceal any merchandise during her shopping trip. Collins responded with vague accusations about matching a suspect description and exhibiting suspicious behavior, unable to provide concrete details that would justify his aggressive approach. Maya requested permission to call her husband to notify him of the situation, explaining that Marcus was currently at the naval base and could provide additional verification of her identity. Collins snatched Maya's smartphone from her hand when she attempted to dial Marcus' number, claiming that suspects were not permitted to make phone calls during active investigations. The phone shattered against the tile floor when Collins threw it away from Maya, the broken screen reflecting the overhead lights in jagged fragments. Zoe's crying intensified at the sound of the breaking phone, and she called out for her daddy while reaching desperately for Maya's protection. Maya knelt beside her daughter's seat in the shopping cart, whispering reassurances while trying to calm Zoe's fears about the increasingly chaotic situation. Collins ordered Maya to stand up and step away from the child, claiming that her proximity to Zoe represented a potential safety threat that required immediate intervention. Maya slowly stood while keeping her hands visible, explaining that Zoe was her daughter and asking why she would be prohibited from comforting a frightened 3-year-old child. Collins called for backup assistance over his radio, reporting that he had encountered a suspicious individual who was resisting cooperation and potentially posed a threat to public safety. Maya looked around the store at the growing crowd of witnesses, many of whom were recording the encounter with their smartphones while expressing disbelief at Collins' aggressive behavior. Jennifer Walsh attempted to show Collins additional security footage proving Maya's innocence, but he ordered her to delete all recordings and confiscate customer phones that contained evidence of the encounter. Several customers refused to surrender their devices, arguing that they had the legal right to record police activity in public spaces. Collins threatened to arrest anyone who continued filming, claiming that their recordings interfered with his investigation and constituted obstruction of justice. Maya remained calm and respectful throughout the confrontation, repeatedly asking Collins to explain the legal basis for his accusations and requests. Collins became increasingly agitated by Maya's composed demeanor and articulate questions, interpreting her intelligence and self-advocacy as signs of disrespect toward his authority. Maya pointed out that she had fully complied with all of Collins' reasonable requests and had not engaged in any behavior that would justify the escalating police response. Collins demanded that Maya place her hands behind her back for handcuffing, claiming that her failure to submit to arrest constituted resisting police authority. Maya asked what specific charges were being filed against her, noting that Collins had not observed her committing any crimes during their entire interaction. Collins could not provide a coherent explanation for the arrest, instead relying on vague references to suspicious behavior and matching suspect descriptions. Maya's nursing background had taught her to remain calm during medical emergencies, and she applied those same skills to de-escalate the confrontation with professional communication techniques. Collins interpreted Maya's calm demeanor as arrogance and defiance, fueling his determination to assert dominance over someone he perceived as challenging his authority. Maya asked to speak with Collins' supervisor, explaining that the situation had escalated beyond the scope of any reasonable police investigation. Collins refused to contact his commanding officer, claiming that Maya was in no position to make demands during an active arrest situation. Maya's shopping cart remained exactly where she had stopped it, filled with healthy groceries and baby supplies that clearly contradicted any accusations of criminal activity. Collins ordered nearby customers to disperse and stop recording, threatening arrest for anyone who refused to comply with his demands for privacy during the encounter. Maya looked directly at Collins and spoke with quiet dignity, asking him to consider how his actions would affect her 3-year-old daughter's perception of police officers and community safety. Collins' face reddened with anger at Maya's implied criticism of his conduct, and his hand moved toward the taser attached to his duty belt. Maya noticed Collins' aggressive body language and raised her hands in a peaceful gesture, indicating that she posed no threat and was willing to cooperate with reasonable requests. Collins misinterpreted Maya's defensive posture as a sign of impending resistance, and he began to justify the use of force as a preemptive measure against potential violence. Maya's voice remained steady as she asked Collins to consider the presence of her young daughter and the impact that any violent action would have on an innocent child. Collins drew his taser from its holster while claiming that Maya's movements and verbal responses indicated an imminent threat to officer safety that required immediate neutralization. Collins activated his taser without warning, sending 50,000 volts of electricity through Maya's body as she knelt beside her daughter's shopping cart seat. Maya's muscles contracted violently from the electrical shock, causing her to fall backward onto the cold tile floor, while her body convulsed uncontrollably for several terrifying seconds. Zoe's piercing screams echoed throughout the store as she watched her mother collapse, the 3-year-old's cries mixing with gasps of horror from witnesses who could not believe what they had just observed. Maya's body went limp after the initial shock, her eyes rolling back as she lost consciousness while lying motionless beside the scattered contents of her purse. Collins immediately placed handcuffs on Maya's unconscious form, rolling her onto her stomach and securing her wrists behind her back while claiming she had assaulted a police officer. Jennifer Walsh rushed to Zoe's side, lifting the traumatized child from the shopping cart while calling for emergency medical assistance and demanding that Collins explain his use of force. Collins radioed for paramedics and additional backup, reporting that he had been forced to subdue a violent suspect who had attacked him during a lawful arrest. Customers throughout the store continued recording with their smartphones, capturing clear evidence that Maya had made no aggressive movements toward Collins before he deployed the taser. Collins ordered witnesses to stop filming and delete their recordings, threatening to confiscate phones as evidence in his investigation of Maya's alleged assault on a police officer. Several customers refused to comply with Collins' demands, arguing that their recordings documented police misconduct rather than criminal behavior by Maya. Collins wrote in his notepad that Maya had reached for his weapon when she knelt to comfort her daughter, fabricating a justification for his use of the taser. Maya remained unconscious for nearly 3 minutes, her breathing shallow and irregular while concerned customers begged Collins to remove the handcuffs so she could receive proper medical attention. Collins insisted that standard protocol required suspects to remain restrained until medical personnel could evaluate their condition and confirm they posed no ongoing threat. Zoe continued crying for her mother while Jennifer Walsh held her, the child's voice hoarse from screaming and her small body trembling with fear. Collins called dispatch to report that he had successfully apprehended a suspect who had been wanted in connection with theft incidents at multiple retail locations throughout the city. Sergeant Tom Morrison arrived as the first backup officer, immediately questioning Collins about the circumstances that led to the use of force against an unconscious woman with a small child. Collins repeated his fabricated account of Maya's aggressive behavior, claiming that she had threatened him verbally and made movements toward his weapon that required defensive action. Morrison examined the scene and noticed that Maya's shopping cart contained only groceries and baby supplies, with no stolen merchandise or weapons that would support Collins' allegations. Officer Lisa Park arrived as additional backup, her 2 years of police experience making her visibly uncomfortable with the scene of an unconscious black woman handcuffed on a grocery store floor. Morrison asked Collins to explain why Maya remained unconscious several minutes after being tased, noting that most subjects recovered much more quickly from electrical shock. Collins claimed that Maya was probably faking her unconsciousness to gain sympathy from witnesses and avoid prosecution for her crimes. Morrison requested that Collins provide specific details about Maya's alleged assault, noting inconsistencies between his verbal report and the physical evidence at the scene. Collins became defensive about Morrison's questions, reminding him that fellow officers were expected to support each other rather than second-guess split-second decisions made in dangerous situations. Morrison observed that multiple witnesses were disputing Collins' version of events, suggesting that a more thorough investigation would be necessary to determine what actually occurred. Collins dismissed witness testimony as unreliable, claiming that civilians often misunderstood police procedures and jumped to conclusions about officer misconduct. Morrison asked Jennifer Walsh to preserve all security footage from the incident, recognizing that video evidence would be crucial for any subsequent investigation. Collins objected to Morrison's request for security footage, arguing that witness statements and officer testimony should be sufficient to resolve any questions about his conduct. Paramedics arrived and immediately expressed concern about Maya's continued unconsciousness, noting that prolonged neural depression after taser deployment could indicate serious medical complications. Collins ordered paramedics to transport Maya to the hospital while maintaining police custody, insisting that she remain handcuffed during medical treatment. The lead paramedic, veteran EMT Robert Chen, argued that handcuffs would interfere with proper medical assessment and treatment of Maya's condition. Collins refused to remove the restraints, claiming that Maya had already demonstrated violent behavior and posed an ongoing threat to medical personnel. Chen documented Collins' refusal to allow proper medical treatment in his report, noting that such interference could be considered obstruction of emergency medical services. Morrison pulled Collins aside and advised him to allow paramedics to treat Maya without restraints, warning that unnecessary interference with medical care could create additional legal complications. Collins reluctantly agreed to remove the handcuffs but insisted that an officer must accompany Maya to the hospital to prevent her escape from custody. Morrison assigned Officer Park to escort Maya to the hospital, specifically instructing her to observe and document any statements Maya made upon regaining full consciousness. Maya began to regain consciousness as paramedics prepared to transport her, her first words being a confused question about her daughter's safety and whereabouts. Chen assured Maya that Zoe was safe with the store manager, while medical personnel evaluated Maya's condition and vital signs. Maya tried to sit up but experienced severe dizziness and nausea from the electrical shock, forcing paramedics to immobilize her on a transport stretcher. Collins approached the stretcher and informed Maya that she was under arrest for assault on a police officer and resisting arrest, reading her rights while she was still disoriented from the taser. Maya asked Collins to explain what she had done wrong, noting that she could not remember making any aggressive actions toward him or anyone else. Collins repeated his false accusations while paramedics loaded Maya into the ambulance, claiming that she had attacked him when he attempted to question her about suspicious activity. Maya was transported to Virginia Beach Naval Hospital, where she had worked as a pediatric nurse for the past 4 years, her unconscious form wheeled through the emergency department doors where her colleagues immediately recognized their respected teammate. Dr. Patricia Williams, the chief of pediatric nursing who had supervised Maya's career development and considered her one of the most dedicated professionals on staff, rushed to the trauma bay when she learned that Maya had been brought in as a police custody patient. Officer Lisa Park stood uncomfortably beside Maya's hospital bed, her radio crackling with updates from the scene while medical personnel worked to assess the extent of Maya's injuries from the taser deployment. Dr. Williams demanded to know why Maya was handcuffed to the hospital bed, pointing out that restraining an unconscious patient violated both medical ethics and hospital policy regarding treatment of staff members. Park explained that Collins had insisted on maintaining custody during medical treatment, despite her own reservations about the necessity of restraints for an unconscious woman who posed no apparent threat. Maya's vital signs showed elevated blood pressure and irregular heart rhythm, both potential complications from electrical shock that required immediate medical intervention and continuous monitoring. Dr. Williams ordered comprehensive neurological tests to determine whether Maya had suffered any brain injury from the taser deployment, noting that prolonged unconsciousness was not typical for healthy adults. Maya's medical chart showed no prior history of heart problems or seizure disorders that would predispose her to complications from electrical shock, making her extended unconsciousness medically concerning. Dr. Williams contacted Maya's emergency contact information and discovered that her husband, Marcus Johnson, was listed as a Navy SEAL team leader, currently assigned to Naval Special Warfare Group 2. Marcus was in a classified briefing with his 8-man team when he received the urgent phone call from Dr. Williams, who carefully explained that Maya had been injured during a confrontation with police. The briefing room fell silent when Marcus answered his phone and listened to Dr. Williams describe Maya's condition, his teammates immediately recognizing the gravity of the situation from his facial expression. Marcus asked Dr. Williams to repeat the details about Maya's arrest and tasing, unable to comprehend how his wife could have been involved in any situation that would justify police use of force. Dr. Williams read Maya's medical chart over the phone, describing the electrical burn marks from the taser prongs and the neurological symptoms that indicated significant trauma from the shock. Marcus informed his commanding officer, Captain Sarah Mitchell, about the family emergency and requested immediate leave to go to the hospital where his wife was being treated. Captain Mitchell granted Marcus emergency leave and assigned Lieutenant Commander James Torres to monitor the situation and provide any necessary support for the Johnson family. Marcus drove to the hospital in his Navy uniform, the SEAL trident on his chest catching sunlight through the windshield as he navigated traffic while processing the shocking news about Maya's arrest. Maya regained consciousness as Dr. Williams was completing her neurological assessment, immediately asking about Zoe's whereabouts and safety, while struggling to remember the events that led to her hospitalization. Dr. Williams assured Maya that Zoe was safe with Jennifer Walsh at the grocery store, and that social services had been contacted to arrange temporary childcare until family members could retrieve her. Maya attempted to explain to Dr. Williams that she had been shopping peacefully when Officer Collins approached her with accusations that made no sense given her innocent behavior. Dr. Williams documented Maya's account of events in her medical record, noting the patient's confusion about why she had been tased and arrested during a routine shopping trip. Officer Park observed Maya's conversation with Dr. Williams, recognizing that Maya's calm and coherent responses contradicted Collins' claims about violent and irrational behavior. Maya asked Dr. Williams to contact Marcus and explain that she had not been involved in any criminal activity, fearing that her husband would be confused about the circumstances of her arrest. Dr. Williams had already contacted Marcus and assured Maya that he was driving to the hospital to be with her during this traumatic experience. Maya began experiencing severe headaches and muscle pain from the taser shock, requiring pain medication and continued observation for potential complications. Dr. Williams noted that Maya's injuries were consistent with electrical trauma and documented the specific locations of taser burns on Maya's back and shoulder. Officer Park asked Dr. Williams about Maya's medical condition and prognosis, expressing concern about the severity of injuries from what Collins had described as a routine arrest. Dr. Williams explained that taser deployment could cause serious medical complications, particularly when used on individuals who posed no immediate threat to officer safety. Maya asked Officer Park to explain what crime she was accused of committing, noting that she could not recall engaging in any behavior that would justify arrest. Park admitted that she had arrived after the incident and could only relay the information provided by Collins, which included accusations of assault and resisting arrest. Maya pointed out that multiple witnesses and security footage could verify her peaceful behavior throughout the entire shopping trip at Coastal Plaza Market. Park acknowledged that witness testimony would be important for any investigation into the incident, but emphasized that she could not make decisions about dropping charges or releasing Maya from custody. Maya asked to speak with Collins' supervisor about the false accusations, explaining that she needed to understand why she had been targeted for arrest during an innocent shopping trip. Park promised to relay Maya's request to Sergeant Morrison, who was still at the scene collecting statements from witnesses and reviewing store security footage. Maya's medical condition stabilized after several hours of treatment, but Dr. Williams recommended overnight observation due to the neurological symptoms associated with electrical shock trauma. Marcus arrived at the hospital as Dr. Williams was completing Maya's medical evaluation, his Navy uniform and military bearing immediately commanding respect from hospital staff and security personnel. Marcus embraced Maya carefully while avoiding her bandaged injuries, his relief at seeing her conscious and alert mixed with anger about the circumstances that led to her hospitalization. Marcus Johnson entered Maya's hospital room with the controlled intensity of a combat veteran, his Navy SEAL uniform pressed to perfection, and his Trident warfare pin gleaming under the fluorescent lights as he assessed his wife's condition with the tactical awareness he used in dangerous overseas missions. His 6'2" frame filled the doorway as he surveyed the room, taking note of Officer Park's uncomfortable posture and the handcuffs that still secured Maya to the hospital bed despite her obvious medical vulnerability. Marcus spoke with quiet authority as he identified himself to Officer Park, presenting his military identification and explaining that he was Maya's husband and emergency contact for all medical decisions. Park immediately recognized Marcus' military rank and professional demeanor, her training teaching her to show respect for service members while maintaining her law enforcement responsibilities. Marcus asked Park to provide a detailed explanation of the charges against Maya, noting that Dr. Williams had been unable to give him specific information about the alleged crimes. Park admitted that she had not witnessed the incident and could only repeat the accusations made by Collins, including claims of assault on a police officer and resisting arrest. Marcus requested to review the police report and witness statements, explaining that he wanted to understand the legal basis for his wife's arrest and continued detention. Park explained that the investigation was ongoing and that detailed reports would not be available until Collins completed his documentation of the incident. Marcus asked Park about the store security footage that would show Maya's behavior during the entire shopping trip, noting that video evidence should resolve any questions about her guilt or innocence. Park acknowledged that security footage existed but explained that she was not authorized to make decisions about evidence review or charge dismissals. Marcus removed his smartphone and began recording his conversation with Park, informing her that he was documenting the situation for potential legal action against the police department. Park did not object to being recorded, recognizing that Marcus had the legal right to document his wife's treatment while in police custody. Marcus asked Dr. Williams to explain Maya's injuries in detail, requesting comprehensive medical documentation that could be used in any subsequent legal proceedings. Dr. Williams described the electrical burns from the taser prongs and the neurological symptoms that indicated significant trauma, emphasizing that such injuries typically required extensive use of force. Marcus asked Park why Collins had chosen to use a taser against an unarmed woman who was shopping with a small child, noting that such force seemed disproportionate to any reasonable threat assessment. Park admitted that she had also questioned Collins about his decision to deploy the taser, but had been told that Maya posed an immediate threat to officer safety. Marcus pointed out that multiple witnesses and security footage would contradict any claims about Maya behaving aggressively toward police officers. Park agreed that witness testimony and video evidence would be crucial for determining what actually happened during the encounter. Marcus asked to speak with Collins directly to understand his perspective on the incident, but Park explained that Collins was still at the scene completing his investigation. Marcus called his commanding officer, Captain Sarah Mitchell, to report the situation and request guidance about how to proceed with civilian legal matters while maintaining his military responsibilities. Captain Mitchell assured Marcus that the Navy would provide full support for his family during this crisis and authorized him to take whatever leave time was necessary. Marcus contacted Robert King, the security chief at Virginia Beach Naval Hospital, who was a former Marine and understood the gravity of the situation involving a military family. King reviewed the hospital's security footage of Maya's arrival and treatment, noting the excessive nature of restraints for an unconscious medical patient. Marcus asked King to preserve all hospital security recordings as potential evidence for legal proceedings against the police department. King agreed to secure the footage and provide copies to Maya's legal representatives when they were retained. Marcus called civil rights attorney Amanda Foster, whose reputation for handling police misconduct cases made her the obvious choice for representing Maya in federal court. Foster listened carefully to Marcus' description of the incident and agreed to take Maya's case on a contingency basis, recognizing the clear violations of civil rights. Marcus provided Foster with contact information for Dr. Williams and suggested that she review Maya's medical records to document the extent of injuries from the taser deployment. Foster explained that she would immediately file motions to preserve all evidence related to the incident, including police reports, witness statements, and security footage. Marcus asked Foster about the possibility of federal charges against Collins for violating Maya's civil rights under color of law. Foster explained that federal prosecution was possible if the evidence showed that Collins had deliberately targeted Maya because of her race, which seemed likely given the circumstances. Marcus returned to Maya's bedside and explained that he had contacted a civil rights attorney who would represent her interests in both criminal and civil proceedings. Maya expressed relief that Marcus was taking charge of the situation, noting that she had felt helpless and confused about the legal process while dealing with her medical injuries. Marcus asked Maya to describe everything she remembered about the encounter with Collins, taking careful notes that he would provide to their attorney. Maya recounted her peaceful shopping trip and Collins' aggressive behavior, emphasizing that she had cooperated with all reasonable requests and had made no threatening movements. Marcus recognized that Maya's account was completely inconsistent with any justification for police use of force, confirming his suspicion that she had been targeted because of her race. Meanwhile, Collins called Police Chief Daniel Morrison to report that the situation at Coastal Plaza Market had attracted significant attention from witnesses and media outlets. Collins claimed that Maya had attacked him unprovoked and that her husband was now trying to use military influence to avoid prosecution for her crimes. Chief Morrison assured Collins that the department would provide full support for his actions and advised him to stick to his original account of events, regardless of contradictory evidence. Collins expressed concern that video footage and witness statements might contradict his report, but Chief Morrison promised that internal investigations would be conducted fairly and thoroughly. Chief Morrison contacted the police union representative to discuss legal protection for Collins in case Maya's family filed civil rights lawsuits against the department. Collins completed his incident report with fabricated details about Maya's aggressive behavior, including false claims that she had reached for his weapon and threatened to harm him. Collins submitted his report to Sergeant Morrison, who noted several inconsistencies between the written account and his own observations at the scene. Morrison expressed concerns about Collins' version of events, but Collins insisted that witness accounts were unreliable and that officer safety had required immediate use of force. Marcus' 8-man SEAL team arrived at Virginia Beach Naval Hospital within 2 hours of his emergency call, their dress blue uniforms creating an imposing presence in the sterile corridors as they walked in formation toward Maya's room. Petty Officer First Class Miguel Rodriguez, the team's communications specialist, carried a tablet containing initial social media posts about Maya's arrest that were already spreading across multiple platforms with hashtags demanding justice. Petty Officer Second Class David Thompson, the team's medic, immediately consulted with Dr. Williams about Maya's condition and prognosis, his combat medical training allowing him to understand the severity of electrical trauma injuries. Petty Officer, 2nd Class Kenneth Carter, the team's intelligence analyst, had already begun researching Officer Collins' service record and discovered multiple civilian complaints that had been dismissed without proper investigation. Petty Officer 3rd Class James Williams, the team's demolitions expert, stood silently beside Maya's bed, with his jaw clenched in barely controlled anger at seeing a military family member treated with such disrespect. Petty Officer 3rd Class Anthony Jackson, the team's sniper, positioned himself near the window where he could observe any police activity in the hospital parking lot while remaining ready to respond to potential threats. Petty Officer 3rd Class Michael Davis, the team's electronics warfare specialist, used his technical skills to download and preserve social media videos of Maya's arrest before they could be deleted by platform moderators. Petty Officer 3rd Class Patrick O'Brien, the team's linguist, monitored local news broadcasts and police radio traffic to assess how the incident was being reported and investigated by authorities. Petty Officer 3rd Class Samuel Kim, the team's reconnaissance specialist, conducted discreet surveillance of the grocery store where Maya was arrested, documenting the scene and identifying potential witnesses who had not yet been interviewed by police. The team's coordinated response demonstrated their loyalty to Maya as an extended military family member and their commitment to ensuring justice for the wife of their respected team leader. Marcus briefed his teammates on the situation while Dr. Williams continued monitoring Maya's recovery from the taser injuries, explaining that Collins had fabricated charges to justify his unprovoked use of force. Rodriguez showed Marcus the viral social media videos that clearly contradicted Collins' claims about Maya's behavior, noting that millions of viewers had already seen evidence of police misconduct. Thompson examined Maya's medical chart and confirmed that her injuries were consistent with excessive force rather than the minimal restraint that should have been used for a peaceful arrest. Carter presented his preliminary research on Collins' disciplinary history, revealing a pattern of complaints from African American citizens that had been systematically dismissed by department supervisors. Williams expressed the team's unanimous support for whatever legal action Maya and Marcus decided to pursue, emphasizing that military families deserved protection from police abuse. Jackson reported that additional police officers had arrived at the hospital, but were maintaining a respectful distance from Maya's room, possibly due to the presence of uniformed Navy personnel. Davis showed Marcus the preserved video evidence from multiple camera angles, creating a comprehensive record that would be difficult for Collins to dispute in court. O'Brien provided updates on local news coverage that was becoming increasingly critical of Collins' actions, as more details about Maya's background became public knowledge. Kim returned from the grocery store with contact information for several witnesses who were willing to testify about Collins' aggressive behavior and Maya's peaceful compliance with his requests. Civil rights attorney Amanda Foster arrived at the hospital and immediately met with Marcus and his team to review the evidence they had collected and plan their legal strategy. Foster explained that the video evidence and witness testimony created a strong case for federal civil rights violations that could result in significant criminal and civil penalties for Collins. Foster asked Marcus' team to continue documenting any attempts by police to interfere with Maya's medical treatment or intimidate witnesses who had observed the incident. Maya expressed gratitude for the overwhelming support from Marcus' teammates, noting that their presence made her feel protected during the most traumatic experience of her life. Foster interviewed Maya about the incident, while Dr. Williams monitored her vital signs, ensuring that the legal process did not interfere with her medical recovery. Maya provided Foster with detailed information about her background as a pediatric nurse and community volunteer, establishing her credibility as a law-abiding citizen who posed no threat to public safety. Foster explained that Maya's professional reputation and community involvement would be important factors in demonstrating that Collins had targeted her without justification. Marcus asked Foster about the timeline for filing federal charges against Collins, emphasizing the importance of swift justice to prevent similar incidents against other military families. Foster promised to file preliminary motions within 24 hours, and to push for an expedited investigation by federal authorities who had jurisdiction over civil rights violations. Meanwhile, local television news crews began arriving at the hospital after receiving tips about the viral videos of Maya's arrest and the presence of Navy SEAL personnel. News reports described Maya as a respected healthcare worker and military spouse who had been tased without provocation while shopping with her young daughter. Collins watched the news coverage from the police station and realized that his fabricated account of events was being contradicted by overwhelming evidence of his misconduct. Collins called Chief Morrison again to express concern that the media attention was making it impossible to control the narrative about Maya's arrest. Chief Morrison assured Collins that the department's public relations team would work to discredit the video evidence and portray Maya as a dangerous suspect who had threatened officer safety. Collins' union representative arrived at the police station and advised him to avoid making any additional statements about the incident until legal counsel could review the case. Internal Affairs Captain Helen Brooks opened a preliminary investigation into Collins' use of force after viewing the viral videos that clearly showed Maya's peaceful behavior. Brooks noted that Collins' written report contained significant discrepancies with the video evidence and witness statements collected at the scene. Morrison attempted to delay the Internal Affairs investigation by claiming that Collins was being unfairly targeted by biased media coverage and activist groups. Brooks insisted that a thorough investigation was necessary to maintain public trust in the police department, regardless of external pressure or political considerations. Navy Public Affairs Officer Commander James Washington contacted Virginia Beach Police Chief Daniel Morrison within hours of the viral videos reaching national news networks, demanding a comprehensive explanation for the treatment of a naval family during what appeared to be a racially motivated incident. Commander Washington informed Chief Morrison that the Navy took any mistreatment of military families very seriously and expected full cooperation with federal investigators who would examine potential civil rights violations. Chief Morrison attempted to downplay the incident by claiming that Collins had followed proper procedures when arresting a suspect who posed a threat to public safety, despite overwhelming video evidence contradicting his assertions. Commander Washington pointed out that Maya's status as a military dependent entitled her to certain protections under federal law, and that any abuse of those protections would be prosecuted to the full extent of federal statutes. FBI Special Agent Victoria Chen opened a federal civil rights investigation after reviewing the viral videos and determining that Collins' actions appeared to constitute excessive force under color of law. Agent Chen contacted Amanda Foster to coordinate the federal investigation with Maya's civil lawsuit, ensuring that both criminal and civil proceedings would proceed simultaneously without interference. Foster provided Agent Chen with the comprehensive evidence package that Marcus' team had assembled, including witness statements, medical records, and preserved social media videos. Agent Chen interviewed Dr. Williams about Maya's injuries and medical treatment, documenting the severity of trauma caused by Collins' unnecessary use of the taser weapon. Virginia Attorney General Patricia Rodriguez announced that her office would conduct an independent investigation into the incident after reviewing the disturbing video evidence and Collins' questionable service record. Attorney General Rodriguez contacted Chief Morrison and informed him that state authorities would examine whether Collins' actions violated Virginia civil rights statutes that carried significant criminal penalties. Chief Morrison called an emergency meeting with his senior staff to discuss damage control strategies for an incident that was rapidly escalating beyond local police jurisdiction. Morrison instructed his public relations team to prepare statements defending Collins' actions while discrediting Maya's character and questioning the reliability of video evidence. Deputy Chief Margaret Foster, Chief Morrison's second-in-command, privately expressed concerns about the department's strategy of defending obviously problematic conduct captured on multiple video recordings. Foster warned Chief Morrison that continuing to support Collins could result in federal intervention that would damage the entire department's reputation and funding. Morrison dismissed Foster's concerns and insisted that supporting Collins was necessary to maintain officer morale and demonstrate that the department would not abandon officers who made split-second decisions. Maya and Marcus held a press conference at the hospital with Attorney Foster, where Maya spoke calmly about her traumatic experience while emphasizing her love for her community and desire for justice. Maya described her shock at being tased while shopping with her daughter, noting that she had always trusted police officers to protect rather than harm innocent citizens. Marcus stood beside Maya in his Navy uniform, his military decorations visible as he explained that military families deserve the same constitutional protections as all American citizens. Attorney Foster presented the timeline of events and legal basis for federal civil rights charges, emphasizing that Collins' actions violated clearly established constitutional principles. The press conference generated additional national media attention. with civil rights organizations and military advocacy groups expressing support for Maya's fight for justice. Representative Jennifer Martinez, whose congressional district included Virginia Beach, called for congressional hearings on police treatment of military families after watching Maya's press conference. Senator Robert Chen announced that he would introduce federal legislation strengthening civil rights protections for military dependents who encounter local law enforcement officers. Mayor Patricia Cruz faced increasing political pressure to address the incident after thousands of constituents contacted her office demanding accountability for Collins' actions. Mayor Cruz met with Chief Morrison and advised him that continuing to defend Collins was becoming politically untenable given the overwhelming evidence of misconduct. Morrison argued that abandoning Collins would set a dangerous precedent and encourage frivolous complaints against other officers who were simply doing their jobs. Mayor Cruz pointed out that Maya's case involved clear video evidence of excessive force, rather than ambiguous allegations that could be reasonably disputed. Morrison threatened to mobilize police union support against any elected officials who undermined officer safety by second-guessing tactical decisions made in dangerous situations. Mayor Cruz recognized that Morrison's defense of Collins was creating a public relations disaster that could damage her own political career and the city's reputation. Community organizers began planning rallies and protests, demanding Collins' immediate termination and prosecution, with military families playing prominent roles in the demonstrations. Collins remained on administrative duty while the multiple investigations proceeded, his access to firearms and police powers suspended pending resolution of the allegations. Collins hired criminal defense attorney Robert Thompson, who advised him to maintain his original story despite contradictory evidence that would be difficult to explain in court. Thompson warned Collins that federal civil rights charges carried potential sentences of up to 10 years in prison, making plea negotiations a serious consideration. Collins insisted that he had acted appropriately and expressed confidence that his fellow officers and union representatives would support him throughout the legal process. Agent Chen's investigation revealed that Collins had been involved in 12 excessive force incidents involving African American suspects over the past 5 years. With all complaints dismissed by supervisors, Chen discovered that Chief Morrison had personally intervened to prevent serious disciplinary action against Collins on multiple occasions, suggesting a pattern of protecting problematic officers. Morrison's personnel files showed that he had received federal grant money specifically designated for community policing and racial bias training, funds that apparently had not been used effectively. Federal investigators discovered a disturbing pattern in Collins' arrest records showing that 73% of his excessive force incidents involved African American suspects, despite black citizens representing only 28% of the local population. FBI agent Victoria Chen's forensic analysis revealed that Collins had deliberately targeted military families over the past 3 years, believing that service members would not file complaints due to their reluctance to create public controversies that might affect their careers. Chen's investigation uncovered internal police emails between Collins and Chief Morrison, discussing strategies for avoiding accountability when complaints were filed against officers who used excessive force against minority citizens. Collins had boasted to fellow officers that military families were easy targets because base commanders typically preferred to handle problems internally rather than allow public scandals that might embarrass the military. Chen discovered that Morrison had created an informal policy directing supervisors to dismiss complaints against officers when the victims were military dependents, assuming that service members would prioritize their careers over civilian legal actions. Morrison's computer files contained communications with police union lawyers, discussing how to exploit military families' desire for privacy to avoid prosecution for officer misconduct. Federal prosecutors reviewed Chen's evidence and determined that Collins and Morrison had engaged in a conspiracy to violate the civil rights of military families under color of state law. Mayor Patricia Cruz announced that she was terminating Chief Morrison effective immediately after learning about his role in covering up Collins' pattern of abuse against military families and minority citizens. Cruz appointed Deputy Chief Margaret Foster as interim police chief, with a mandate to implement comprehensive reforms and cooperate fully with federal investigators. Foster immediately suspended Collins without pay and referred his case to federal prosecutors, emphasizing that the department would no longer tolerate officers who violated citizens' constitutional rights. Foster ordered a complete review of all excessive force cases from the past 5 years, promising to reopen investigations that had been improperly dismissed by Morrison's administration. Attorney Amanda Foster filed a federal lawsuit against Collins, Morrison, and the city of Virginia Beach seeking $10 million in damages for Maya's physical injuries and emotional trauma. The lawsuit alleged that Collins' actions constituted assault under color of law and that Morrison's cover-up violated Maya's rights to due process and equal protection under the Constitution. Foster's legal team presented evidence that Collins had received training on racial bias and de-escalation techniques, but had chosen to ignore those protocols when confronting Maya. Maya's medical records documented ongoing physical therapy for nerve damage caused by the taser shock, as well as psychological counseling for post-traumatic stress related to the incident. Marcus testified in depositions about the impact of Maya's arrest on their family, including Zoe's nightmares and fear of police officers following the traumatic incident. Maya returned to work at Virginia Beach Naval Hospital, where she received overwhelming support from colleagues and patients who had followed her story in the news. Dr. Patricia Williams recommended Maya for a commendation, recognizing her grace under pressure and her commitment to serving military families despite her own traumatic experience with local law enforcement. Maya used her public platform to advocate for police accountability and racial justice, speaking at community forums and military family support events. Marcus continued his Navy SEAL duties with full support from his commanding officers, who praised his professional handling of a personal crisis that could have escalated into a more serious incident. Admiral Robert Hayes, the commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Group 2, issued a public statement supporting Maya and Marcus while calling for accountability from civilian law enforcement agencies. Admiral Hayes met with Mayor Cruz and Interim Chief Foster to discuss protocols for future interactions between local police and military families, emphasizing the need for mutual respect and professional conduct. Community organizations throughout Virginia Beach held rallies supporting Maya's fight for justice, with speakers emphasizing that police accountability was essential for maintaining trust between law enforcement and the citizens they were sworn to protect. Military families from across the region attended the rallies, sharing their own experiences with police harassment and expressing gratitude that Maya had the courage to speak out about systemic problems. Collins hired additional defense attorneys after realizing that federal prosecutors were building a comprehensive case that could result in a lengthy prison sentence for violating Maya's civil rights. Collins' legal team advised him that his best option might be to cooperate with federal investigators and provide information about other officers who had engaged in similar misconduct. Morrison faced his own federal charges for conspiracy and obstruction of justice related to his pattern of covering up police misconduct against minority citizens and military families. Morrison's attorneys began plea negotiations with federal prosecutors, hoping to reduce his potential sentence by providing information about corruption throughout the police department. Virginia Attorney General Patricia Rodriguez announced that her office would conduct a comprehensive review of police practices in all jurisdictions that received federal funding for community policing programs. Rodriguez promised to pursue criminal charges against any officials who had used federal grant money inappropriately while failing to address racial bias in law enforcement. Congressional Representative Jennifer Martinez introduced federal legislation requiring local police departments to report all use of force incidents involving military families to federal oversight agencies. Senator Robert Chen scheduled hearings on police accountability and military family protection, calling Maya and Marcus as key witnesses to testify about their experience and recommend policy changes. Civil rights organizations across the country began using Maya's case as an example of why federal civil rights enforcement was necessary to protect all citizens from police abuse of power. Maya received invitations to speak at law schools and police academies about the importance of constitutional rights and professional conduct in law enforcement interactions. Federal prosecutors convened a grand jury that returned comprehensive indictments charging Collins with deprivation of rights under color of law, assault with a dangerous weapon, filing false police reports, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. Morrison faced additional charges for obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and violating his oath of office by systematically covering up police misconduct against minority citizens and military families. Collins' maximum potential sentence reached 25 years in federal prison, if convicted on all counts, with prosecutors seeking enhanced penalties due to his targeting of military families. Morrison faced up to 15 years imprisonment for his supervisory role in the conspiracy, with federal prosecutors arguing that his leadership position made his crimes more serious than Collins' individual acts of misconduct. Maya and Marcus' federal civil rights lawsuit resulted in a landmark $10 million settlement with Virginia Beach, establishing new precedents for compensating victims of racially motivated police violence. The settlement agreement required the city to implement comprehensive police reforms, including mandatory bias training, civilian oversight of excessive force investigations, and special protections for military families. Collins' previous victims began filing their own lawsuits after learning that federal investigators had documented his pattern of targeting minority citizens over multiple years of service. The class action lawsuit eventually included 47 plaintiffs who had been subjected to Collins' excessive force, with total settlements exceeding $35 million paid by the city and police union. Maya became a nationally recognized advocate for police accountability, testifying before Congress and speaking at universities about the need for comprehensive criminal justice reform. Marcus continued his distinguished military career while supporting Maya's advocacy work, demonstrating that military families could successfully fight for their constitutional rights without compromising their service commitments. Interim Police Chief Margaret Foster implemented sweeping reforms that became a national model for addressing racial bias and misconduct in law enforcement agencies. Foster's reforms included body camera requirements for all officers, civilian review boards with subpoena power, and automatic federal reporting of any use of force incidents involving military personnel. Maya's courage in confronting police misconduct inspired other victims to come forward, leading to investigations that exposed corruption in multiple law enforcement agencies throughout Virginia. Collins' case became a textbook example in law schools and police academies of how racial bias and abuse of power could destroy both individual lives and institutional credibility. Maya and Marcus used their settlement money to establish a foundation providing legal assistance to military families who encountered police misconduct, ensuring that other victims would have resources to fight for justice. Zoe Johnson, now safely in elementary school, no longer feared police officers after meeting the reformed Virginia Beach Police Department's community liaison officers who visited her school to build positive relationships with children. However, the most shocking revelation came during Collins' federal trial, when FBI agent Victoria Chen testified that Collins had not been acting as a rogue police officer, but had actually been an undercover federal informant, assigned to gather evidence of corruption within the Virginia Beach Police Department. Agent Chen revealed that Collins had been recruited by the FBI 3 years earlier to investigate allegations of systematic civil rights violations, and had been given federal immunity for his undercover activities. Collins was supposed to document misconduct by other officers while maintaining his cover as a regular patrol officer, but federal prosecutors discovered that he had instead become a participant in the very crimes he was meant to expose. Chen testified that Collins had been feeding information to corrupt officers about federal investigations, allowing them to destroy evidence and silence witnesses before charges could be filed. The FBI's internal affairs investigation revealed that Collins had been operating outside his federal mandate for over 2 years, using his informant status to justify increasingly aggressive behavior against minority citizens. Federal prosecutors argued that Collins had betrayed his oath as both a police officer and a federal informant, making his crimes even more serious than ordinary misconduct. Collins' defense attorneys claimed that the FBI had inadequately supervised his undercover activities and had ignored warning signs that he was becoming too deeply involved in criminal behavior. Agent Chen admitted that federal supervisors had failed to properly monitor Collins' activities, allowing him to commit serious civil rights violations while believing he was protected by federal immunity. The revelation that Collins was a federal informant created a scandal that reached the highest levels of law enforcement, leading to congressional investigations into FBI informant oversight procedures. Maya and Marcus learned that their fight for justice had exposed not only local police corruption, but also federal law enforcement failures that had enabled Collins' crimes against multiple families. Federal prosecutors were forced to review hundreds of cases involving Collins' activities as an informant, determining that his misconduct had compromised numerous criminal investigations and violated the rights of countless citizens. Maya's case ultimately led to comprehensive reforms in federal informant management, ensuring that undercover operatives would be held accountable for any crimes they committed while gathering intelligence. The unexpected revelation that federal law enforcement had enabled Collins' abuse through inadequate supervision created a national conversation about accountability at all levels of the justice system, with Maya and Marcus continuing their advocacy to ensure that no other families would suffer as they had. What do you think about the accountability reforms that emerged from Maya and Marcus' fight for justice? Have you or your family ever encountered situations where you felt law enforcement treated you unfairly? Share your thoughts in the comments below about how we can continue working together to ensure that all families, military and civilian alike, receive equal protection under the law. If this story moved you, please hit the like button, subscribe to stay updated on more stories of courage and justice, and share this video with others who believe that standing up for what's right can create meaningful change. Thank you for taking the time to learn about Maya and Marcus Johnson's journey from victim to advocate. And remember that each